The Jack Daniels and Coke has worked really well. Some of the other stuff we've done hasn't worked so well.
Bottoms up. It's Coca-Cola CEO James Quincey at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland.
It's really in that innovation stage, and we're not expecting everything to work.
He's talking all things Coke, the evolution of alcohol mixers, the iconic Diet Coke, and, naturally, sizing.
I think shrinkflation applies, as a term when you only sell one pack, but that's not how we do business. The regular can, for example, of a Coke has not changed from decades.
The economic picture for consumer packaged goods, both stateside and abroad.
China in 2024 through the third quarter was just okay. Clearly, there's some economic adjustments happening.
And how a brand like Coca-Cola builds loyalty in markets everywhere.
If we've done our job properly, they see it as a global brand, but also intensely local because it's local jobs. They see the salesperson and the manufacturing side and the distribution truck.
I'm CNBC producer Cameron Costa. Squawk Pod reports from Davos. Coca-Cola CEO James Quincey begins right now. Another day, another huge interview from the World Economic Forum in Davos. Leaders like JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Olympian Lindsey Vonn, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, and many, many more have convened in the Swiss Alps. You can hear many of the big thinking conversations happening in Davos right on your Squawk Pod podcast feed. Wherever in the world these leaders are, a big topic is China. More specifically, China's economic health. The Chinese economy grew 5% last year, meeting government targets. But that was largely thanks to exports, rushed out in advance of any tariffs from newly sworn-in Donald Trump. Consumer spend there has lagged despite the positive metrics. An outlook for 2025 is murky. Procter & Gamble, for example, has reported multiple quarters of sagging China sales. CEO John Mueller spoke to us on Squawk this week.
Very strong in Northeast Asia. Obviously, China, the Middle East, a little bit weaker.
But P&G is not giving up.
We continue to look at China as a source of mid and long-term growth. If you just look at the demographics, yes, you've got an aging population, but you also have a population that is growing as relates to income.
Johnson & Johnson, same deal. CFO Joe Woke told us,
the big catalyst in China, specifically in our medtech business, is around volume-based pricing that they have. And because the economy has slowed down, the volume in some of the outlying districts for which those pricing agreements weren't covered didn't really follow through. If you look at our pharmaceutical business, that performed pretty well throughout the course of 2024. So it's largely a medtech matter. Our estimates going forward do assume, I'd say, a somewhat pessimistic outlook.
Now, the CPG category doesn't only include over-the-counter meds and diapers, though. It also includes beverages, like the specialty Diet Coke hand-delivered to Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago this month. And that's where we're going to start this next interview. The CEO and chairman of Coca-Cola sat down with Andrew Ross Sorkin in Davos and Becky Quick, who was in New York.
James Quincey, it is so nice to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Becky's back in New York, and she may remember this. Many years ago, you brought us bottles, our own bottles, that said Andrew, Becky, and Joe on them. And I was thinking about that because, of course, there's images of you everywhere just the last week going down to Mar-a-Lago, bringing the president a bottle. Have you always had bottles for the president?
We have been doing inauguration bottles for like 5 inaugurations.
But they never got attention like that.
No, they didn't. But this time we did a Diet Coke one, which was slightly different. Before, there'd always been Coca-Cola ones, going back the last 5. And this time we did a Diet Coke one because, of course, the president is one of the great Diet Coke consumers. We did it.
How many Diet Cokes a day do you think he drinks?
I have no idea.
Did you guys discuss his Coke consumption?
No, we actually had the interesting conversation we had was like he also likes Coke. So he actually goes back and forth. I think he obviously drinks more Diet Cokes than Cokes. But he's a consumer. He loves the product. He loves the brand. And we thanked him for the business.
When you go to a meeting like that, and we've seen now a lot of different business executives go to visit with President Trump, what do you talk about? What are you asking for?
It wasn't that. Actually, right. We'd sent the bottle with a nice letter. Actually, the president had written a response back on the letter saying, thanks very much. And his team said, well, why don't you come down and give it to him personally? So it was more kind of just to present the bottle. We talked about all sorts of things across the scope of how the world's going, golf, which sort of golf courses does he? It was a bit of everything, but it was a nice opportunity to present, the president of the United States his own bottle.
When you told him about the economy, and maybe you can tell our audience, how do you see it now? I mean, you do have your pulse on the global economy in a way that actually most don't in terms of what consumer demand looks like.
I think the economy is in good shape going into 2025. I think the US is particularly strong. There are other bits that are a little softer, maybe Europe. But in broad terms, the economy globally is in okay shape. The US is clearly in better shape going into 2025. And I think that's what's going to take us forward.
In terms of inflation and pricing power, what does that look like for you right now?
In the US, it's clear that it's moderating down to much more normal levels. I mean, inflation overall is at 3, which is pretty close to 2. I know there's a lot of worry that it'll be hard to squeeze the last 1% out, but think how far we've come just to get down to 3. So we see inflation in the US moderating substantially, and we see ourselves on a track down to what the Fed is going to be happy with, and we're sure they'll stay applied to the business of getting down. And that's also true globally. Inflation globally, whether it's the developed economies of Europe or some of the more inflationary economies, we see inflation coming down, and that's a more normalized state of affairs. And we see that playing out in 25.
Like so many other food companies, you have been accused by the Elizabeth Warrens of the world of shrinkflation. What do you make of that argument that the bottles are smaller, the portions are less, given the price?
I think shrinkflation applies, as a term when you only sell one pack. But that's not how we do business. I mean, not only do we sell lots of different products, but a Coca-Cola is available in lots of different sizes. The regular can, for example, of a Coke has not changed from decades. So our strategy is to provide a range of choice of different pack sizes at different price points. So there is no real shrinkflation in that sense. In the sense you can buy a 6-ounce Coke or a 3-liter Coke around the world. That all the pack sizes are out there, and our intent is to provide the right amount of liquid at the right price for what you want.
Talking about liquid, you've been adding alcohol to some of the liquid recently. I'm curious how that's been going.
It's a super initial start. We've got some joint ventures with.
Well, you have a deal with Bacardi just now.
Bacardi and Jack Daniels, and with Absolute vodka and Sprite. These are premixed cocktails,
right?
And they're kind of experimental. And so we're looking at a couple of places around the world, saying, is this something that's got a bit of traction? We need to believe it can become a significant segment within the alcohol industry, or relative to beer, let's say. And that we can get a significant share. I mean, it's easy to make. The question is it easy to market and sell?
So that's what I was going to ask. I mean, just in terms of the early testing, what are the results like?
Some things have worked really well, like the Jack Daniels and Coke has worked really well. Some of the other stuff we've done hasn't worked so well. It's really in that innovation stage, and we're not expecting everything to work. And we need to prove to ourselves that it's worth continuing to invest in, that it's not just a hobby, that it can be something big. Early signs are good. And we'll see where we go in 25.
What are the opportunities in the developing markets at this point?
I mean, there's lots of different pieces of the developing one. It's not a singular thing, obviously. We're very excited about the growth potential in India. We've been investing heavily in India. We've seen strong growth in India over the last 5 years. We see continued growth in Southeast Asia, in Africa, and of course, Latin America, which is a big piece of the Coke business. So in general terms, the developing markets are good. Led, I think, principally or first in line by India. Of course, there are places which have been adjusting to very high inflation and all sorts of geopolitical problems over the last few years, which are obviously in negative territory. But generally, I think the developing economy is gathering steam.
Becky's got a question for you back in Times Square.
I do. James, it's good to see you. Wanted to talk to you about an issue. We've spoken with a couple other Dow components today, executives from Dow Components, both Procter & Gamble and Johnson & Johnson. And both of them talked about the weakness in China. It was a big issue for J&J, a headwind that they've been dealing with. Procter & Gamble saw weakness, but not as much as they had seen in the previous quarter. Obviously, China's a big market for you, too. What do you see there? What's the economy telling you? What are sales like?
Look, I think China, I think, it's been okay in 2024. We haven't announced the results for the fourth quarter yet, but China in 2024 through the third quarter was just okay. Clearly, there's some economic adjustments happening in China. They've got a kind of real estate deflation, not unlike some of the other countries around the world. We all remember the savings and loan issue in the US. So they got a macro adjustment that's coming through in the economy that's taking off some of the growth, but the growth is still there. Our business is doing improve. We made some decisions to rebase the business early in 24, but we think the consumer is still in pretty good shape, and we're looking forward. I mean, the key selling period in China for us is Chinese New Year, which is right now, and we're looking forward to having a good Chinese New Year.
I'm curious what you think the impact, of tariffs or the prospect of tariffs are on Coca-Cola, insofar as Coca-Cola is one of these companies that represents America. I mean, this is one of the great American brands. And here we have this moment where there could be some tectonic shifts in terms of how some foreign countries think about the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to think that Coca-Cola is a very interesting business, not just a global brand. And what I mean by that is everyone sees it as a massive global brand, but actually it's also an intensely local business, and often consumers see it as a very local brand. All the Cokes made in country X sold in country X tend to be made in country X, and all the Cokes in country Y tend to be made.
No, I'm not arguing that you're going to be impacted by tariffs per se. I'm sort of
the geopolitical fallout.
Yeah, the sentiment of that.
No, I think if we've done our job properly, they see it as a global brand, but also intensely local because it's local jobs. They see the salesperson and the manufacturing side and the distribution truck, and that's part of the incredible power of the Coca-Cola brand is it can be seen as both a global, an American brand and a local brand all at the same time. And if you look back over the history of geopolitical disruptions, whether they come from economic or other reasons, it's been incredibly resilient business. So we feel we have the ability to be resilient if things get complicated.
You are one of the biggest spenders when it comes to advertising in the world. I'm curious what's going on right now in terms of how you're thinking about online spend, Facebook, Instagram. Are you advertising on TikTok, for example?
We do, but very.
Will that have an impact if TikTok goes away in the United States?
It won't have a huge impact on us because we advertise in lots of different channels. I mean, of course, we're looking at which channels give us the effectiveness based on who we want to talk to about which brand and which occasion, which demographic. And also, the prices vary between the different channels. So it's not just about which one's effective, it's about who's charging what. So we have lots of options to advertise. So it's good. It's a broad market. So if one player, drops out for whatever reason.
Any great surprise on efficacy? I mean, for those CMOs out there who are listening to this conversation, is there anything that you've learned in the last 6 months you go, that worked in a way we didn't expect? That's pretty good.
I tell you what's working is generative AI. I know that's a topic and it's probably already been beaten to death this year. But the generative AI ads, there was a huge debate about whether our Christmas ad was more or less effective because it was made all with generative AI. The data says it was more effective.
And do you expect most of the ads in the future to be produced by generative AI?
Not this year, maybe not even next year, because doing video through generative AI is not simple. It needs a lot of compute, and it's not. You got to also get a good price from all the AI guys because it's not free.
Right.
But I do think that's the direction of travel, and it's not yet good enough to do humans.
Real quick, how much are you using AI for logistics and the like?
AI in the kind of calculation sense has been in logistics for a long time. I mean, there's been AIs in the supply chain for quite a long time. The current thing that's really different is this generative AI, whether it's around text or image, and actually putting it together and getting voice or sound and motion, video. That's what could really change marketing.
I want to thank you, James, for coming in. It's great to see you, as always. I usually drink lots of Diet Coke on the set, but today it's coffee to stay warm. Nice
cold.
To see you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this special Squawk Pod Reports from Davos. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Squawk Pod is produced by me, Cameron Costa, Katie Kramer, and Caroline Rahotis. John Lazration is our editor. Have a great day.